yeah, this is one of the interview series that's going on with Exodus Deja VU project, as you know, and for our followers as well. And you're one of our...
Come on, Patrice. Okay. All right.
You're one of our 11 great photojournalists that are being featured in this project. And unfortunately, due to the pandemic, we have to do everything online, as these interviews as well. So that's why we're here. Thank you so much again for your time and for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I guess we can start.
Okay, right away.
So yeah, I've been looking at the latest catalog for the project, and it's really amazing the work that you all do, all of our photojournalists' works. And yesterday we also interviewed Coşkun Aral from Turkey. He's also a world photojournalist, as you know. Great work, and yourself as well. I was really impressed. And so yeah, you've been covering a lot of places in the world. You've been covering Afghanistan, Africa, South Sudan specifically, and also women's camps in Uganda, right?
Yes, that's true. And actually, well, I didn't mean to really correct you or anything like that, but I wasn't able to go to South Sudan. So instead, I went to Uganda as an alternative.
Okay.
Because it was very difficult. I mean, at the time, the South Sudanese government was really hard on journalists. I hope the official government officials of South Sudan are not listening to this, but it was very difficult for me to, I mean, we don't have the diplomatic relations, first of all, with South Korea and South Sudan. I mean, although the names are kind of similar, right? I mean, South Korea and South Sudan.
Yeah.
But Koreans had some armies over there, and we sent troops to South Sudan. So the army was stationed there, but we actually didn't have the diplomatic relations. So it was very, first of all, difficult to get the visa, not to mention the journalist visa. And I was really struggling to get into South Sudan, but I was also advised not to go there now, especially when I was trying to do a story about survivors, victims of sexual and gender-based violence. So we're going to all talk about it later too. But I just want to tell you that I could not go to South Sudan.
Yeah, no, that's all right, because that might have been my mistake as well. Maybe I was taking more notes. I was too hasty or quick or something. It might happen. So yeah. Anyway, it's fine.
No, that's no problem.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you. I mean, the situations that created these crises in the areas that you worked and you visited. Can you remind us, what really happened? Why were the political issues that took you there and made you work there with the refugees?
Yeah, as many of us are aware, South Sudan is the youngest country in the world, and they became independent in 2011. And 2.5 years later, all of a sudden they were in the middle of the political turmoil between the president's bodyguards and the vice president's bodyguards that were from different ethnic groups. The president's group was from Dinka tribe, and then the deputy's tribe was from Nuer tribe. And then they began to have conflicts, shooting at each other, and the armed conflicts with violence since December 2013. And from that time on, there was a huge upsurge of violence in the whole country. They struggled so hard to be independent from Khartoum, from Sudan, and now they're independent, but all of a sudden they were in the middle of civil war. And from the time on, people began fleeing the country, especially women and children, because men were usually killed by the opposite tribes' armed men, and women were left, and then a lot of them were sexually violated. And a lot of them were actually they found refuge inside the compound of the UN. in Juba in South Sudan. But people also couldn't stay there because when you just go outside of the compound, a lot of women were, getting raped and they were sexually assaulted too. So they just couldn't. A lot of them couldn't stay inside South Sudan, so they began leaving the country. Uganda was bordering with South Sudan, and it was very physically close with Juba, which is the capital city of South Sudan. So a lot of them flooded into Uganda and the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and even Kenya to Ethiopia. A lot of people were displaced inside the country and outside of the country. And that was the situation in, since 2013. And it didn't stop until like 2016 or 17. My focus of my photojournalistic work and reportage work has been focused on the women's rights and women's situation in wartime, especially sexual and gender-based violence. So I try to go to South Sudan, like I mentioned before in the beginning, but I couldn't get the visa. And even when I was in the process of trying to get a visa, I was kind of discouraged to apply for it because it was an especially difficult time for journalists there. So I decided to go to Uganda instead. And in Uganda, I also wanted to do a story about survivors of sexual violence by the Lord Resistance Army in the late 90s and early 20s by Joseph Kony's group, LRA. And there were also a group of women in the northern Uganda who were surviving from the slavery and sexual slavery, and also the military slavery they had as girl soldiers. So I wanted to actually catch, I guess, two birds in one stone. So I wanted to do a story on that, Ugandan survivors of Lord's Resistance Army who now became more like adults. They are going into the early to mid 30s at the time. I visited there in October 2017. So I wanted to kind of see the situation of what's happening there for them. And then at the same time, I also decided to find some survivors of sexual violence from South Sudan in northern Uganda. And that's how it happened.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. And yeah, maybe this is an early question, but it kind of covers all of them, so I'm just going to ask it. As a photographer, as a photojournalist, what are you focusing on when you're in the middle of these kind of situations? Like when you're in the area, when you're in the middle of the crisis, how do you approach the people and the events that you're covering? And like maybe more generally, what makes good photojournalism for you?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really difficult question that I guess not just me and everybody else.
I mean, I'm pretty sure you're going to keep answering it on the way. Like with every question that I have, you're going to be touching upon this, but it's a really important one. So I just wanted to, drop it here.
Sure. I mean, it's always struggle and agony to find those answers. Well, the refugee situations have been covered by many photographers in the history of journalism and photojournalism. And as a woman from a former colony where women were also the subjects of military sexual slavery, I wanted to focus on those issues, sexual violence, especially among the refugee groups, because it's the repercussion is the consequences of armed conflict. And that was sort of the main kind of focus for my photojournalistic work since, I guess, 2008, 2007, 6 and 7, I lived in Afghanistan for a year. And at the time also, I did a few photo reportage stories on women. But at the time, it wasn't really about sexual violence. It was about maternal health and other general issues of, education and other women's issues and women's rights. But ever since I visited to the Democratic Republic of the Congo in 2008, I began kind of focusing on that issue until now. Although, because of the coronavirus crisis, I haven't been able to do that this year. But until last year, I visited Nigeria and also try to do a photo story about Nigerian victims and survivors of abduction to Boko Haram and sexual slavery there as well, and forced marriages. Because I think I have a special background as a woman, and especially I am not from the countries where, that were the, superpowers of colonizations before. Korea was a colony of Japan for 35, 36 years. And I am from a former colony as well. So from that kind of background of being from a weak country and a former colonized country, I thought I had more empathy to these refugees and these women. Because, pretty much most African countries were colonized by the European superpowers. So, I thought I had some special empathy with them, with Africans especially. With that background, I wanted to really do something that other people, there are many other people who are doing, photo stories of sexual violence. I am not the only one. But I just want to do that with my special background and being a woman, and being an Asian woman. I also want to listen to their stories and do a reportage stories out of thousands of other photojournalists in the world who cover war and conflict and refugee situations. So I could do other things too, like general stories and, life inside refugee camps and IDP camps, and I have done it too. But I find most sort of compelling for myself, not for other people to show, but for me to feel it inside of my heart. I just feel the most empathy and most compassion towards the women victims of sexual violence in the conflict situation. So and then I feel more passionate about discovering those stories out of these dire situations. So that is the reason why I kind of try to really dig into that direction more than anything. And what photojournalism means to me, I have told some young students that good photojournalism and good photo stories will show the spirit of the time that you're living in. I think in German it's called Zeitgeist, and I think if you show the reality and with really good visual storytelling methods, and I think that's good photojournalism. Not to mention having a really good technique when you take pictures, lighting, not lighting like artificial lighting, but natural lights and all that, the angle and all the composition, and those are the technical stuff. But aside from technical aspects, if you can kind of read some sort of a message other than the visual aspects, and I think it's a good photography and good photojournalism. And I'm sorry, before you go on, I think photojournalists, I think they should have to actually see in this context of a hegemony, who's the underdog and who's the offender, who's the power. And the underdogs, and I think you have to feel the feelings of the vulnerables and tell the stories of the vulnerable side rather than the powerful side. So
Yeah, thank you for this answer, because when you said empathy and when you talked about empathy, you kind of brought me to my next question, because I was going to ask you, do you think there's an added value of photography as a medium? I mean, the general public is concerned of refugees, and they see them on the news every day, but they perceive them as mere statistics, you know, thousands of refugees coming to, I don't know, coming from where to where. You know, we watch this in the news, but it doesn't really mean anything. Do you think photography is able to foster understanding and tolerance because it presents the faces of stories to these individuals? I mean, do you think photography, looking at a photo of a refugee, for instance, creates empathy in the viewer's eyes?
I hope so. I mean, there could be other photographs that could touch the hearts of the viewer audience, and there are other pictures that wouldn't touch the hearts of the audience. And I mean, statistics are unfortunately, we need statistics too, to kind of gauge the scale of atrocity and all that. And you know, when I do the reporting, initial reporting and research, I also look for statistics too. Say, for instance, like how serious is the problem in South Sudan, and what is the number of the refugees that are crossing the border to come to Uganda? Say, for instance, how many refugees are in Uganda, and what's the percentage of women and children? And those statistics are really important to begin with and to start the reporting. But it's the visual aspect that really adds to the text to kind of see what's really happening there. And I think, you know, if you talk about the visual aspects, I think the video is actually more influential, and I think it's got more impact than, you know, still images. And, you know, the videos, you can hear the sounds and you do the interviews and all that. So video journalism is also very, very important. And still photography is also important to kind of tell the story too, to visual aspect, because you know, if you just look at the text, then you don't know just by looking at the numbers, like you said, and how big is the problem, and what kind of sufferings they are facing, and what kind of lifestyle they have, and why you know, do I as an audience have to feel something about them, and what can we do to prevent these kinds of atrocities and, you know, miserable lives, and what's the, you know, political context behind it. And that is, you know, all those things, if you want to present it with photography, of course it's difficult, because photography, we can only document the present time. We cannot document what had happened in the past. And when we take pictures, we just document the moments, even less than a minute. I mean, less than a second, I'm sorry. So it's a really, you know, small piece of time that we're documenting, but we're trying to really tell the story in a broader context, and which is very difficult. So sometimes we take pictures, you know, one picture that tells a lot of stories, but sometimes you also take pictures of pieces by pieces to kind of, like, you know, put them together as a narrative and as a series of stories. So it's always difficult, and I face a lot of limitations myself too, as a photojournalist, just by taking pictures, because I, you know, turn to their testimonies, and it's not like I had witnessed anything what had happened to them in the past. So, and at the same time, as a medium, you know, it's actually, I think, a little bit weaker, I guess, to tell the story to the audience than the video. So sometimes you feel all these things, limitations and walls. But you know, I love photography, and I really like communicating with with people, and I like you know, documenting the moments as it is, as still images. So that is why I just keep on doing photography.
Yeah, and I think it's really important because it's difficult. Yes, it is difficult, but I think it is really important to tell these stories, to keep telling these stories in any different platform that's possible. And I think for that reason, projects like this, like Exodus Deja VU, are specifically important. And this brings me to my next question, actually. So Exodus Deja VU project, it's as we know, it's a non-benefit project, and it exhibits some of your pictures as well, among 11 other renowned photojournalists. And the project is based on the idea that all of these photographs capture different individuals, different moments and stories and situations. And on the other hand, when we look at these pictures, from war zones, from conflict zones, they sort of look the same. Regardless of where do we look at, if it's a war zone, the photographs kind of look the same. And when we think about it right now, according to UNHCR, there are around 71 million refugees, displaced people right now in the world. So do you think, like, how do you conceive your role as a photojournalist in this context? How do you feel about being part of an exhibition and presented with other photojournalists while the suffering that refugees have been going on is still continuing in 2020?
Yeah, that's can you hear me?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, that's yeah, that's also a dilemma that I have. Why isn't the problem ending? Even though there have been so many journalists, photojournalists, video journalists, text journalists have been writing and reporting about this for years and years. Why is the conflict in Israel and Palestinian territories are not ending? Why isn't this, you know, power struggles between the West and, you know, perhaps like Afghanistan or Iraq are not ending? I don't, you know, it's kind of disappointing sometimes. What we try to do is that but I think, yeah, sometimes it's really discouraging. And as a person and as a human, I think about, you know, what's the point of doing it myself? But at the same time, I think about the other aspect too. Like, what if I stop doing it? Who's going to do what I'm doing? I mean, of course, I'm not really like undermining other people's efforts or anything like that. I just hope that when I go to these women's, you know, where these women live, whether it be refugee camps or, you know, other homes, but in the conflict zones, I just hope that there's there is somebody who can listen to them, and there is a support group. I mean, there is a support group in South Korea, and in South Korea, they see my pictures, and then, you know, they make donations. And then at the same time, I think about, you know, what Jennifer Connelly has said in the movie Blood Diamond. And she appears as a photojournalist who covered the Taliban and all that. And she was in Sierra Leone at the time. And she was like, oh, yeah, I make, you know, photo reports, and maybe, you know, somebody will write a check, you know, to them. And then she was very skeptical about the roles of journalism. And that was really shocking to me. I just hope that, you know, not just the financial support, but also, you know, I just hope that my efforts will, you know, be a part of the human history of documentation, and a part of the small help for other people to understand. Just one more addition, you know, one more report. I just hope that these women, especially in the Ugandan camp, and these South Sudanese women, and I just hope that their stories will be told. to more people. I mean, it could be 10, it could be 20, but I just hope that it will be told to more than one person, so that people would know that, you know, the sexual violence is still a big issue in the conflict area. And of course, the goal to this kind of documentary work is to end the violence. I'm not God, and I'm just one person who's just really struggling to get funding all the time. And sometimes I, you know, make money for doing other photography jobs in South Korea and then save money and go. Other times I got really lucky and get a sponsorship. However, most of the time I would just go self-funded. And I just hope that one of these days they will remember my work and they remember these women from South Sudan. And there could be other like platforms to talk about these issues, kind of like, you know, our Instagram interview right now. And I see some people are kind of joining one by one. I'm in the bottom here, so that people would hear about women's plight from South Sudan and what's happening in South Sudan. There have been reports by a lot of international NGOs in those refugee camps, like you know, Amnesty International and other really big international NGOs have made reports on victims and survivors of sexual violence due to the conflict in South Sudan. And also my photo reportage will be the addition to their reports too, so that there will be more, you know, more evidence of these women's testimonies. Not just, like you said, like not just statistics, like, oh, you know, some people, what percentage of women were violated or how many women from which area were violated. Not just that, but I just wanted to also, you know, show to the audience that these are the same people as we are. And, you know, humanity is the same everywhere. And they have the same dignity as women, as, you know, just like us, living in a rather comfortable countries or situations. But they're also trying to struggle to live their daily lives. And that's what I'm trying to focus. My photos may not reach a lot of people, but even if they could, you know, they could reach to, you know, a few dozen people, and I'll be happy.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Yeah, yesterday when I was interviewing Joshkun Aral, he said something that really struck me. He said, refugees are humans as well, and everyone can be a refugee anytime, and no one plans for it. No one would think that they would be refugees. No one would think they would be out of their homeland like overnight, but it might happen. It might happen to everyone. And that's why I think what you said is really, really important as well. And yeah, when I looked at your photos, for instance, I was looking at, I really looked at all of your photos in detail in the catalog, and they have a really strong emotional component. And, you know, the women's struggles, and maybe it's because I'm a woman myself as well, but it's not about that, I think. They're really strong emotional components. And when I look at the photo, not like you, of course, you were there, like you experienced it firsthand. But when I looked at it, I saw suffering, I saw despair, hopes, and sorrows as well, all kinds of emotions. And I wanted to ask you, how do you deal with these emotions yourself? Like, how do you approach these people, and how do you cope with these emotions, so to say?
Yeah, thanks for the question, and thanks for your kind comments about my work. Actually, not so many people have really commented about my work, especially this set of photographs about South Sudanese women. You know, there have been a lot of other, you know, I guess bigger issues in terms of armed conflict, say, for instance, the Syrian conflict and Afghanistan and other places. So the interest on Africa and South Sudan especially had been quite low compared to, you know, other bigger issues. So what was I gonna say? So it's very, yeah. It's very, you know, difficult to you know, approach to them, because it's, well, first of all, there were so many of them in the camp, and then actually how the camp in Uganda was set up was not like, you know, you have like a row of tents or anything like that. In Uganda, they call them as settlements instead of camps. And in these settlements, they are trying to like make these refugees integrate into the local communities, and they are called host communities. And you know, when I approach to them, it's really, you know, difficult because they have gone through really difficult, you know, difficult things in their life, and, you know, violations to their dignity. And as a journalist, you know, from their eyes, from a rich country, I mean, we're not really rich, but from their eyes, I'm from a very comfortable place, so
More
it's very
difficult.
I'm sorry?
More fortunate compared to them, maybe.
Oh, yeah. So it's really hard to really bring it up, you know, bring up that issue. And but I do anyways. I approach to them, and I tell them, I say, well, you know, I'm a photojournalist from South Korea, and I would like to hear and deliver your testimony, your stories, and your voices to the rest of the world. Is it okay if I document your life and do interviews? And if they refuse, then that's fine. I don't force them. And if they don't refuse, and if they say okay, yeah, I mean, that's fine. Then that's how I, you know, begin my interviews, and, you know, and documenting their lives. And surprisingly, I met 13 survivors of sexual violence from South Sudan in that camp, and they all, you know, agreed to tell the story, and then, you know, for photography too. And I really appreciate their courage to come forward and to talk about something very private, to talk about something that could be really, you know, difficult, and I guess embarrassing in some cultures, and in most cultures, as a woman. And I, you know, the fact that they agreed to do it, and they really, you know, told me their own stories to me, I really, you know, was really touched by them too. Not only do I, you know, really, you know, get to know them, but also my subjects, you know, the women that I interview and photograph also influence me, and then they touch my heart too. And I think these kinds of you know, interaction and communication really, you know, help build, you know, the stories, and how to really try to, you know, do a good reporting. I want to do a good reporting as much as possible, so that their voices can be heard. Because if I make good reporting and good photo stories, then chances are higher for my set of stories to be published and exhibited, like this one, so that it will be shown to other people. So the most important thing in this particular photo story is to show their courage, I think. And I really appreciate, you know, them coming forward to me. Yeah. And that's how I feel. It's also very traumatic for them and traumatic for me. because, you know, when we talk about sexual violence, it's as a woman, and I really feel what they go through. And I've been sexually, harassed many times when I lived in Afghanistan. And, you know, I could kind of, their suffering is much greater than mine. But, you know, I could kind of really feel like, I keep saying empathy, but, you know, if I don't have empathy and compassion and passion, then I cannot really complete my story. Because, you know, if I don't feel the passion to this story, how can I get into it, and how can I, you know, spend my time and money and, you know, all this efforts with them? So in that sense, you know, their cooperation is also very important too. But you know, I really show my appreciation to them from the beginning to the end.
Yeah, that's really amazing to hear. And I was going to ask you, actually, the structure of this interview is going really well, better than I planned, because all of your answers really tie up with my questions. My next question would be, how is it coming back from these kind of places? Like when you come back from this crisis area back home, how do you feel, and how are these stories you witnessed impact you? And there's also a question from the audience which also ties with this. Do you experience any dramatic scenes when these people expect help from you yourself?
Yeah, to answer to your first question, well, when I come back, and I kind of like, sort of like, I am living in that situation for about, I guess, a couple of weeks. It just doesn't go away from me. The whole experience and whole ordeal to go through, because these reports are never easy. You know, people around me never help me. Sorry about this. And there are always hardships and difficulties, and you know, you look at all these pictures. I'm not just me, but all the other photojournalist pictures, especially the ones that you see the Syrian refugees, you know, sort of like on the boat and stuff like that. You would, you know, a lot of people would think that, oh, you just go there and just snap and take pictures, and that's something I can do or something. But I would have to tell the audience that it's never easy. It's so difficult. I think the pressing the button of shutter button will be the very last step, which doesn't take, you know, more than a second. So just to reach the point of being able to take pictures, it's just a long journey, and all, you know, I have to go through a lot of difficulties. So that's also a little bit traumatic too, because I get, you know, refused all the time. Not necessarily from the subjects themselves, but mostly from officials. So it's always really difficult. So, you know, I think about my report too, but I also think about all the other, you know, 95% of the difficulties that I had gone through from each trip. So those are the things that are really traumatizing. But you know, once I start looking at the pictures and start editing, and then you know, those kinds of, like, you know, traumatic thoughts and experience kind of like a little bit go away, I guess, when you start editing the pictures and looking at the results. But sometimes the results are not satisfactory. So I feel like, oh, I should have done it better. You know, I could have done this way or that way. I always regret. And then I always want to go back and, you know, make more, you know, follow-up reports. However, it also, it has to do with funding too. So in many cases, I don't really get to revisit those places. And those South Sudanese women, I really have a lot of regrets, because I didn't get to stay too long there. And I just really, you know, built a good rapport with them. and then I really wanted to see them again, but I just didn't get the right funding, so couldn't go back. And at the same time, the situation in South Sudan was getting better, actually. I visited there at the end of 2017, and I see the report that saying that by April 2018, I think the two parties, the presidents and the deputy presidents' parties, have come to some sort of a peace deal, but I think the situation within South Sudan was not stable, or it hasn't really come back to the complete the situation as what it was before the conflict. So I think still there are a lot of people still remaining in those camps all over the Eastern African countries. The second question from the audience, what kind of help? I think he mentioned about that, and then I think it just sort of went up all the way. So I just can't see as well. But like as a journalist, I working as a photojournalist for more than 10 years, I think about the dilemma of being a photojournalist, like in the movies of Jennifer Connelly saying that writing off a couple of checks, would it help them? And it's the point of my me doing the report just to give them a financial support, or what if it doesn't generate any financial support to them? And it's always a dilemma, and it's not like I am going to change the world overnight or anything like that, but I just want them to have like the actual assistance and a little bit of change from their life. And then as a photojournalist, I don't want to be the person who use them, who take advantage of them and turn around when my report is done and then go away and not doing anything. And it's always a dilemma. So what I have tried to do is to actually to raise the donation, to raise the money, and then actually deliver the donation money when my report is done. Not before my report, of course, but after my report is done. And I try to sort of make a support group in South Korea, and there have been some support groups, and there have been people, South Korean people who have seen the photographs, and then they make donations, and then I have delivered their donations before. It's not going to change their life overnight, but at least it is sort of an immediate financial assistance, kind of like what we are receiving from the government during the coronavirus crisis. I don't know if the Turkish government is doing it.
They do it as well.
Oh yeah, they do.
They help people quite a lot.
Oh, is that right? Okay. So as a freelancer, things have been difficult. I haven't been able to travel outside of Korea, and all the project proposals have been on hold, right? Because I can't travel, and all the actually right now a lot of fundings are sort of gearing towards the issues of coronavirus pandemic, and then the marginalized group and African American cause. So there is like really little interest right now on survivors of sexual violence in Africa. So it's been very difficult for me, and also my daily life too, because of the coronavirus crisis. So the South Korean government has been giving out some money to the people, like immediate assistance. Not the cash money, but they give us the sort of a points in credit cards, so we can use it. So when I receive those money and the government assistance, I kind of think about them. I think about the women in Uganda and South Sudanese women and how they will feel when they receive these small donations, but they are immediate assistance money, because when I got the money from the government, I felt really good. I felt like, I could buy little things, like some food, and I can eat, with my family. So it was a good breather for me.
Yeah,
So
it especially makes you think in these days, because when we think about the refugees all around the world, I mean, coronavirus is not the only problem that they're facing right now. And it's going to be twice harder for them too. I mean, when you don't have a home, you can't specifically stay at home and protect yourself from the virus. So yeah, it's really harsh to think about them, like their situations and the pandemic going on.
Yeah, it's going to be very difficult. So I think, people might think that, giving them a small donation money may not change their life, and it's got to be sustainable. You got to give them jobs. That's true.
Yeah.
And at the same time, giving them immediate assistance, I feel like it's also very important too, as I experience from the government.
Yeah, but I think, as you said earlier, what should really change their lives is their stories to be heard. And so that's for that reason we're doing all of this, and you're doing your work. And if you can reach your photography to more people who can make an actual difference, who could really help them, maybe it will end up an ultimate help for them one day. So.
Yeah, well, thank you. I mean, we're still working on it, and this is a difficult time for everyone. And I'm sure it's a difficult time for them too, back in the camps.
Jean, we don't have really a lot of time left, and I'm going to have one last question for you. And
Okay.
I think it's really the most important one. Was there one particular moment you want to share with us from your experiences? One specific story to tell us from this reportage, from your time in the camps? Maybe something that made a really strong impression on you? A small anecdote?
Yeah, I have maybe a few anecdotes. One of them is about this 17-year-old girl from South Sudan. When I think one of the pictures is sort of exhibited in the set right now. It's a picture of a very young woman holding a baby. That baby was born out of sexual violence when she was in Juba, and she went to different camps and she gave birth. And when I saw her at the time, she was pregnant again. And so she was pregnant. She was from the Noor tribe, and she was violated by Dinka soldiers the second time. And the child she was holding had like physical disabilities, and the baby had deformed wrists and ankles. So they were twisted and they were not straight. So the baby was born with physical disabilities, and it was really hard to really see that kind of tragedy that had happened to the young girl, who had to actually, who would have been in high school. So it really was hurting to see her and to talk to her. But she was more of a, more positive spirit. So she didn't really show, those difficulties outside. And she was just, living the daily life. But, she had no resources, no money, nothing, no families. She didn't hear anything about her parents. She couldn't go back home. She was just living in the camp with a baby, deformed baby. And I really wanted to go back to the camp after a few months, because at that time she would have had the second child. But of course I couldn't go. Even in that really, really dire situation in humanity, she was surrounded by other survivors from the same country. They could be from different parts of South Sudan, but these 13 women or 15, there were a couple of women who refused. So anyway, so this between 13 to 15 women, group of women, kind of formed a support group within the camp. And they were sort of having this life all together. They were cooking together, eating together. They were chatting together. They were, fetching water together, like you saw in one of the pictures. So I kind of saw a small community of women sort of supporting themselves from the same situation. So it was actually a very, a nice thing to happen to her out of all the, worst things you can kind of imagine.
That's
as
a
a result of
result that could have come out of something horrible. So
yeah,
that's
exactly.
something to be thankful for, right?
Exactly. So that's something that really touched my heart, and I
Thank you
still
so
think
much
about
for that, and thank you so much for sharing it, because it's also really intimate and important for you as well. I think I'm done with all of my questions. I think we can end it now here if you don't have anything else to add. And thank you so much again for your time. And for
Thank you so much for looking at my pictures.
Oh, no problem. Of course, I'm going to continue looking at them from this day on, because I got to know you now. So,
yeah, you can look at www.jeanchung.net.
I will, sure.
Yeah, and then I also posted my photo stories from Nigeria from last year. So, you can also take a look at them.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you for being a part of Exodus as well. And I'm ending the live right now. Thank you all for watching. Bye. It was nice meeting you.
Okay, bye.